What's up, everybody? It is your boy Toxie Boyo, and I'm here to talk to you guys about a little game, little indie game by a studio called Naughty Dog. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but it's this game called The Last of Us Part Two. I have covered this game a couple times in the past. I talked about how I felt about Joel's death. I talked about why the ending didn't work, and I talked about the leaks way back when those came out. And hopefully, this is the last time I'll ever be addressing this game. Um, because when you don't like something or when you don't have any interest in something, you don't typically want to spend too much time talking about it or dwelling on it or thinking about it. Why would you bring that sort of negativity into your life? But I want to talk to you guys today about an aspect of the game that I haven't really touched on before, and that's how the game fails to do the main things that it tries to do. Now, I'm not going to be talking about anything gameplay related or level design related because I think Nikki Jakey did a very good video about that very thing. All of Nikki Jakey's videos are good. Check them out when you're done here. As if you need somebody with almost 14K subscribers to tell you to go watch Nikki Jakey. But Jake's video about the gameplay design of the game was phenomenal. He said everything that I've wanted to say about Naughty Dog for a while, but he did it way better than I ever could. So I'm going to be talking strictly about the narrative and the thematic elements and the plot structure, basically. Now, The Last of Us Part 2 tries to do three things. Um, it it condemns Joel for something that you as a player had no choice in the last game, so that you could feel like his death was justified, or if you disagreed with what he did in the last game, this gives you vindication in feeling that way. Secondly, it tries to get you to sympathize with Abby in a way that you feel bad for her for what happened in the previous game, and not necessarily gets you to root for her or like be glad that she killed Joel, or but at least understand why she did it and forgive her as a player. And thirdly, it tries to send a message that violence is wrong and that the cycle of vengeance and things like that are not the answer, and that forgiveness is the way. Now, let's talk about how it feels to do these things. Joel. All right. Joel's death, as I've already said, from a purely narrative perspective, doesn't make a lot of sense. The characters weren't supposed to be where they were when it happened. Joel was way too trusting in a room full of strangers that had weapons, gave out his name, gave out Tommy's name, all that. Um, it happens so abruptly in the story and so early in the game that you basically are left hating Abby for the rest of the time that you play as Ellie. You don't know who this character is, you don't know why she killed Joel, and you're hoping that it's either going to make sense later or that you're going to kill Abby and get revenge for Joel. Most players, because they love Joel, they're attached to him, even though he's a morally ambiguous character, even though he's a morally gray character. You have that connection to him because you spent roughly 13, 14 hours playing as him in the previous game. Fast forward to about the 10, 12 hour mark in the game, the momentum that has been building up over Ellie's entire part of the campaign. You're moving through the story, you're finding out why she and Joel stopped talking, you're getting closer to Abby, you're going to get your revenge. The game stops dead in its tracks and goes back in time a few years. And you find out that Abby is the daughter of the lead scientist that Joel killed at the end of the first game to prevent Ellie from being killed and harvested to create the cure. Now, because of this, the game is supposed to. The game expects you to just be like, okay, well, I understand. She lost her father. Of course, she wants revenge. but that's not enough. I mean, as far as character motivation, that's the only reason she wanted to do anything that she did at the beginning of the game. It's the entire reason she tracked down Joel. And you can tell because she spared Tommy and she spared Ellie because they were not her targets. She strictly wanted to kill Joel because she lost her father. As far as that is concerned, that's the only motivation. But I ask you, is this one thing that Joel did really worthy of his death? Joel was not a hero, not a saint or anything like that, but he was a good man at his core. He cared very much about the people close to him. He cared a whole hell of a lot about Tess at the beginning of the first game, and he cared a whole hell of a lot about Ellie. Is acting in service of protecting the people closest to him really such a damnable offense? Because the whole point of that scenario in the last game is like, would I make the same decision if I were in that situation? And it's supposed to be a hard question to answer. You're supposed to not really be sure if Joel did the right thing. But the mysticism and the intrigue of that lingering question goes away when the answer is shoved in your face in the form of him paying with his life for what he did. When the studio tells you, hey, no, he did a bad thing, it just becomes a little bit less magical, a little bit less interesting. And I don't think that I'm alone in feeling like that. So the game kind of screws the pooch on that. Now, let's talk just about Abby. The game goes to great lengths to praise Abby and condemn Ellie at the same time. When you're playing as Ellie, you have to kill all of Abby's friends. You stab a pregnant woman. You shoot Abby's off again, on again boyfriend. You beat a woman to death with a pipe. But when you're Abby, you pet a dog, which is the same dog that Ellie has to stab. You you take these two kids under your wing, you protect them, you turn your back on your own people, you risk your life to save these children. Because Abby's just a really good person. And I don't understand exactly what it is about Ellie to where the game has decided to take her and twist her into a mirror of Joel, but not in a good way. Obviously she learned a lot about how to survive and how to thrive in that environment from Joel, but she's become a second him. She's just as ruthless and hardcore and violent and focused and driven as Joel was. So I ask you, does Ellie deserve to die? Because she's just like Joel now. I mean, think about how many people you kill throughout the story. And all the NPCs have names. But it doesn't matter to you as a player or to Ellie as a person because they're just obstacles in your way to get to Abby. But Abby has already gotten what she wants. She has completely moved on. Her campaign is not Ellie focused at all. She's doing a completely different thing at a completely different place, focused on something completely different. And it makes Abby seem like the victim, the prey that's being hunted throughout the story. Because she's, unaware of what's going on. She's unwitting to the situation. She does not know that she is being vehemently gunned after by someone who she very deeply impacted with her actions. Ellie at the beginning of The Last of Us Part 2 is pretty much Abby at the end of The Last of Us Part 1. Her father was killed. But for this instance, it's not about protecting somebody that you care about. It's just revenge. It's just mindless revenge that Abby gets to have and Ellie doesn't. That the player doesn't. Now that works for some people, but not everybody. And what you get with that is a situation where when you've played this game for about a dozen hours and then everything shuts down and the plot grinds to a halt and you have to start from 3 days ago as Abby, and you're moving through the story, you have all these flashbacks and stuff about things you don't really care about because you do not like Abby. At this point, she's just the bitch who murdered Joel. She's not a character to you yet. She's not somebody that you are attached to, that you care about. And for a lot of people, throughout her entire gameplay section, she never became that. She never got to a point where you liked her. And that's completely understandable. The game decides to start characterizing her after she's done the worst possible thing she could do. Why not stick her gameplay section at the beginning of the game? Or cut it up and put it, throughout Ellie's campaign. Put Joel's death in the middle of the game. The order in which these events unfold makes it very difficult to attach yourself to Abby or see her as a personable character that you can care about by the end of the story. That is a complete failure on the story and plot structure. For instance, say you were watching. Well, I was going to use Spider Man into the Spider Verse as an example, but before that version of Spider Man dies at the beginning of the movie, you do get time with him, you know? And you understand a little bit more about Kingpin by the time he kills Spider Man. So that's not even a good example. But say you were watching. Let's see, what works for what I'm going for here? Um, I don't know. It's actually kind of challenging to figure out what I want to go for here. But take any story. Um, Say it's the second game, second movie, second book, second season of whatever you're consuming, and your main character is just murdered outright. Um, and you understand that there could be any number of reasons as to why that would happen, but it's by a complete rando at this point. Just Joe Chill, from the Batman comics, just walked into the story and plugged the main character. And you're just spending the entire rest, or like not even the entire rest of your time with that piece of art, but multiple hours, chapters, episodes, whatever you're doing, wondering why it happened. And then by the time you get to the reason why, it's something as simple as you my name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die. It's just not compelling enough a reason. It's not interesting enough. It's literally, we live in a post-apocalypse. Many people have killed many people's fathers. I really don't care. So that's why I feel like what's the word I'm going for? Trying to make Abby such a sympathetic character by virtue of, oh, well, she had people that she cared about and that cared about her. Look how good she is with animals. Look how much of a good guardian she is to these children. It's not enough. Now, next, we have the cycle of vengeance. I want to touch on something I said earlier. You had to kill a pregnant woman as Ellie. Pregnancy and children and taking care of children, things like that, that's a theme in this game that comes up a lot. But it serves to accomplish something different in each instance. Dina being pregnant is a big deal for Ellie, but it also gives Abby more reason to kill her. But I thought we were supposed to, feel bad for that character, but only when she wants revenge. Ellie, of course, can't have that. Mel being pregnant serves to create tension between Abby and Owen. It also leads to Mel doing something stupid, but her being pregnant at the time that Ellie kills her is a good way for Ellie to visualize that she's gone too far, that she has crossed a line that she can't come back from in the pursuit of the same thing that Abby pursued at the beginning of the game. But we didn't really see Abby's path towards vengeance. We just saw the finish line, and she just did it, you know? Um, and then, Abby taking care of the kids kind of likens her to Joel because these children are not outright her responsibility, but she's taking them on anyway because, she's their best chance of survival. And that's great. But how come Abby gets to be Joel like in these elements or in these aspects and she gets what she wants. She gets what she was looking for. And Ellie is Joel like in other aspects and gets nothing. She walks away from the story with less than she had at the beginning. Now, they make it very clear that, you know, vengeance, violence, all that stuff isn't going to solve anything. It won't bring Joel back. But the way that they go about it, as I mentioned before in my video about how the ending doesn't work for me, is very redundant. Because the only reason Ellie didn't get her revenge in the middle of the game is because Abby came after her, straight up just killed Jesse. That's cool, I guess. Shot Tommy in the back of the head and was about to kill Dina. But if things had gone differently and Ellie hadn't dropped the map like a little idiot, she still very well could have just changed her mind and gone back for revenge anyway, like she does later on in the game. But she was going to just accept that they had failed. They were going to cut their losses, head back to Jackson, and just deal with losing Joel how they needed to. But that didn't happen. Uh, some things got in the way. But some time passes. You know, Ellie starts raising her own child with Dina because Jesse, you know, isn't. He's a bit of an absentee father. But something that never occurs is that Ellie never starts to understand why Joel did what he did. The last time she ever talks about it is the night before Joel is killed. But how do you now, as a parent, not understand the same feeling that Joel had for you? You have this kid that you would do anything for. You would not let anybody hurt this child, but you never say, okay, Joel, I know why you did what you did. I forgive you. But no, she forgives him while she's drowning Abby, and then forgives Abby in that same instance, I suppose. They don't really address that. But the whole point is that, you know, the cycle of vengeance and all that stuff is bad, but you go after her, decide it's not worth it, and leave. That's the decision that they made. Things obviously went a different way, but Ellie was planning to just go back to Jackson. Time passes, and then you decide to go after her again. This time you get to her, you could very easily kill her. But again, you decide it's not worth it. For a different reason this time, but still, it's such a waste of time for a character to have the same revelation twice in one story. Especially when nothing significant enough has changed with that character between the first and second time having that revelation to make the second revelation worthwhile or worth your time or even necessary in the first place. Nothing happens that sorry, nothing happens that necessitates Ellie having a second epiphany about violence not bringing Joel back or what she's done having gone too far. There's no reason for her to have to go through that twice. The game should have ended with her having her child and her wife, basically. Have Ellie, since you want her to be so much like Joel in so many different ways, have Ellie come to love this child as her own, the same way Joel came to love Ellie as his own. And finally understand why Joel did what he did and why Joel lied about it. Because that is a far more organic and logical and reasonable motivation for Ellie to give up on going after Abby again. Maybe she thought about it. Maybe it's crossed her mind a couple times. Maybe she's thought about just getting up, getting on a horse, and leaving to try to find Abby again. But she has something now that she can't afford to lose. Just like Joel had something that he could not afford to lose. So the cycle of vengeance is wrong. Unless you're Abby. In which case, you pretty much get everything you wanted, like I said. Sure, you lose a couple of friends because your revenge sparked another revenge. But overall, Abby gets to have what she wants and presumably live relatively happily ever after the game is over. And Ellie loses her fingers, loses her child, and loses the love of her life in pursuit of the same thing that Abby was in pursuit of at the beginning of the game. To that same end, she loses everything. That is a very ham-fisted way to beat you over the head with this message that's honestly not very new or unique. It feels like the game is taking 20 hours to say one sentence, but it's not going about it in a way that's engaging or interesting. It literally just leaves you angry most of the time that you're playing the game. And I guess maybe that's what they were going for. And I guess maybe that works for some people. It might work for you watching the video. But it's not strong enough to build an entire story around. And that is how I feel like The Last of Us Part 2 fundamentally fails at what it is attempting to accomplish. You don't have to agree. And if you don't agree, you definitely don't have to tell me. But that's just how I feel. So, with all that being said, I'll see you guys in the next video.